A woman every day has to decide what's for dinner. Go get the ingredients, cook it, call the plumber when something is broken, choose the color of the paint, and hire the painter. Will not lie on her back and wait for you, mister. She will jump you like she's the stallion. She will expect you to submit because all the other leadership responsibilities have increased her testosterone and dropped her a huge pair of balls. I had to get that off my chest. Welcome back, everyone. Lance Scurv X here, the Scurv Podcast. Too many of us sisters, our cousins, our aunts, our mothers, our daughters, our women are simply not appreciated. As the title says, how can she do it all and still submit? When responsibility falls on women, but authority belongs to men. Now, this is not some type of feminist rant. This is not talk from a browbeaten man. But we have to talk about things. And like I say, I'm brutally honest, and we're going to have opinionated commentary on this platform. There's certain things that men are underappreciated for, the good men, and I'll speak about it. But I'm going to be brutally honest across the board. And there's a question that sits quietly in the minds of many women, even when they don't say it publicly. It's a question that can carry years of frustration, exhaustion, disappointment, and resentment. How can a woman be expected to lead the family, manage the household, hold the relationship together, solve problems, raise children, handle emotional crisis, contribute financially, and carry responsibilities that never seem to end, then suddenly be told that she's supposed to step back and submit when it comes to intimacy and the man's desires? You better be dolled up better than a porno star. That's what he expects after doing all of that. But my God, sometimes you might be a little too tired. But that's a serious question, and it deserves a serious answer. Too many conversations about relationships become shouting matches where men defend men, women defend women, and nobody stops long enough to examine the actual weight that people are carrying. I'm not interested in turning this into another exercise in male bashing, because plenty of men are responsible, hardworking, loving, and deeply committed to their families. But I also can't pretend that there aren't women who are carrying so much that they barely have enough energy left to remember who they are. When one person is expected to become the manager, the planner, the emotional support system, the problem solver, the financial backup plan, the disciplinarian, the caretaker, and the person who keeps everything from falling apart, something eventually begins to break down. Sometimes it's the relationship. Sometimes it's the person's health. Sometimes it's their peace of mind. And sometimes it's their respect for the person standing beside them who talks about leadership but doesn't seem to understand what leadership actually costs. That's where the contradiction becomes impossible to ignore. A man may say that he wants a traditional woman, but when the bills arrive, when children need attention, when the house needs to be managed, when a crisis appears, when decisions have to be made, and when emotional strength is required, he's comfortable allowing the woman to take charge. But when it comes to authority, intimacy, and getting his own way, suddenly the language changes. Suddenly, she's reminded that the man is supposed to lead. A relationship can't operate according to whatever definition of leadership is most convenient at a particular moment. Leadership isn't a costume that someone puts on when they want obedience and removes when responsibility arrives. If a man wants the authority connected to leadership, then he has to understand the responsibility that comes with it. And if a woman has been carrying the responsibility for years, then her questions about power, respect, intimacy, and partnership deserve to be heard. One of the biggest problems in modern relationships is that many people confuse leadership with control. Real leadership isn't about having the loudest voice in the room. It's not about demanding obedience. It's not about reminding everyone that you're the man every time somebody disagrees with you. Leadership means responsibility. It means showing up when things get difficult. It means making decisions while understanding that those decisions affect other people. It means carrying the weight instead of simply pointing at someone else and telling them what to carry. A woman who wakes up thinking about the children's needs, the food in the house, the bills that are coming, the family member who needs help, the emotional condition of her partner, the work schedule, the school problems, the appointments, and the dozens of small details that keep a household functioning is already performing a form of leadership. She may not call herself the leader. She may not even want that role. But if everything falls apart when she stops doing what she does, then we have to be honest about how much responsibility she's carrying. This becomes especially important when a man speaks proudly about being the head of the household while the woman is actually functioning as the engine that keeps the household moving. There's a difference between being recognized as the leader and actually doing the work that leadership requires. A title without responsibility becomes an empty title. Authority without contribution eventually creates resentment. And demanding submission from someone who is carrying most of the load can feel less like partnership and more like another responsibility being placed on her shoulders. That's why so many women become emotionally exhausted. They aren't simply tired from working a job or cleaning a house. They're tired from constantly thinking. They're tired from anticipating problems before they even happen. They're tired from being the person everyone calls when something goes wrong. They're tired from having to be strong when they would prefer to be vulnerable. And then, after carrying all that weight, they're sometimes expected to instantly transform into whatever version of femininity makes someone else comfortable. That's where many men have to become more honest with themselves. You can't expect a woman to be in survival mode all day long, making major decisions and carrying the emotional weight of the family, then act surprised when she doesn't automatically shift into a completely different emotional state simply because you want her to. Intimacy doesn't exist in a separate universe away from the rest of the relationship. The way a woman is treated throughout the day can affect how she feels at the end of it. There's something deeply unfair about expecting a woman to take control whenever life becomes difficult while expecting her to surrender control whenever a man wants to feel powerful. That's not balance. That's selective tradition. That's choosing modern equality when responsibility needs to be handled and choosing old-fashioned authority when obedience is desired. If a woman has to make decisions because nobody else will, then she's going to develop the confidence and habits of a decision maker. If she has to protect herself because she can't depend on anyone else to protect her, she's going to become independent. If she has to provide because the financial responsibilities aren't being handled, she's going to learn how to survive without depending completely on someone else. And some men become frustrated because the woman they've watched carry the entire operation no longer behaves like someone wanting to be directed. But what exactly did they expect? You can't leave a woman alone in the driver's seat for years and then suddenly demand that she forgot how to drive because you want to take the wheel during the parts of the journey that satisfy you. A woman doesn't become strong in a vacuum. Strength is often developed because weakness wasn't an option. Independence is often created because dependence became dangerous. And leadership skills are often built because someone had to step forward when nobody else would. This doesn't mean that every independent woman hates men or wants to dominate a relationship. That's another oversimplification that prevents honest conversation. Many women would gladly share responsibility with a dependable, emotionally mature, and consistent partner. They aren't necessarily asking to carry everything. In many cases, they're asking to finally put something down. That's an important distinction. A woman who has learned to do everything isn't always celebrating the fact that she has to do everything. Sometimes she's exhausted by it. Sometimes she wants to feel safe enough to relax. Sometimes she wants a relationship where strength isn't required every minute of the day. But relaxation becomes difficult when she's constantly wondering whether the person beside her will actually show up when life gets hard. The bedroom isn't a separate kingdom where everything that happened throughout the day suddenly disappears. The emotional atmosphere of a relationship follows people into intimate spaces. A woman who feels ignored, unsupported, overworked, disrespected, or taken for granted may not simply forget those feelings because the lights are low and her partner suddenly wants closeness. You know what I mean, right? That's where maturity becomes important. Intimacy isn't simply about what one person wants from another person. It's about connection, trust, communication, comfort, and mutual desire. You heard that word, mutual? Nobody should feel like they are carrying the entire relationship on their shoulders and then expected to provide emotional or physical closeness on demand as if nothing else matters. And let's be clear about something else. Submission in a healthy adult relationship should never mean the disappearance of a person's voice, boundaries, or choices. A woman doesn't stop being a full human being because she's in love. Respect doesn't end at the bedroom door. Communication doesn't end because the relationship becomes intimate. Mutual agreement and consideration matter everywhere. If a man wants a woman to trust him deeply, then he has to build that trust beyond moments when he wants something. He wants that satisfaction. He has to be trustworthy when the rent is due. He has to be dependable when she's emotionally overwhelmed. He has to be present when the family is facing a crisis. He has to listen when she speaks. He has to understand that the foundation of closeness is built long before the private moments ever arrive. Too many people want the benefits of intimacy without doing the daily work of connection. They want access without emotional investment. They want affection without accountability. They want to be desired without asking whether the other person feels valued. But real relationships don't work that way for long. Eventually, the neglected emotions begin to speak. When we talk about these issues within the Black community, we have to acknowledge that the conversation can carry additional layers of history, economics, family pressure, and social expectations. Many Black women have grown up watching women in their families become the people who held everything together. They saw mothers, grandmothers, sisters, and aunts carry families through financial hardship, relationship struggles, health problems, child rearing, and moments when support was limited or completely absent. That strength deserves respect. But strength can also become a trap when people begin to expect it from someone all the time. A Black woman can be praised for being strong while quietly being denied the opportunity to rest. She can be celebrated for holding everything together while nobody asks who is holding her together. She can be admired for surviving almost anything while people forget that survival isn't the same thing as peace. The image of the endlessly strong Black woman can become dangerous when it turns into an excuse for everybody else to give her more weight. People may assume that she can handle another responsibility because she's always handled everything before. But just because someone has survived under pressure doesn't mean that the pressure isn't hurting them. Strength should never become an excuse for neglect. At the same time, Black men face pressures that can't be ignored either. Economic barriers, social stereotypes, discrimination, unstable employment, incarceration, broken family structures, trauma, and the emotional damage that comes from generations of struggle can all affect how men see themselves and how they show up in relationships. None of this should become an excuse for irresponsible behavior, but understanding the pressure can help us have a more complete conversation. The problem comes when the wounds of the community begin fighting each other inside the home. A man who feels powerless in the world may try to reclaim power in his relationship. A woman who has spent her life being forced to survive may struggle to trust anyone enough to let down her guard. Both people may enter a relationship carrying generations of pain, disappointment, and fear, then wonder why love alone doesn't automatically solve everything. That's why we have to stop treating Black men and Black women as opposing teams. We're dealing with people who have often been pressured by forces larger than themselves while also carrying personal responsibility for how they treat one another. A painful history can explain certain patterns, but it can't give us permission to keep repeating them. And that's on both sides. One of the saddest things that can happen is when a woman's strength begins to threaten the very person who should appreciate it. Instead of seeing her ability as something that helps the relationship, some men may interpret it as competition. They may feel challenged by her independence. They may feel uncomfortable when she earns more money, makes better decisions, or demonstrates emotional strength in areas where they struggle. But a relationship isn't supposed to be a competition for dominance. If your partner's success makes you feel smaller, the answer isn't to make your partner smaller. The answer is to grow. If a woman's intelligence makes a man feel insecure, silencing her won't solve the insecurity. If her ability to manage the household exposes a man's lack of involvement, demanding submission won't suddenly make him a better leader. A secure man doesn't need to constantly prove he's in charge. His actions create confidence. His consistency creates trust. His willingness to accept responsibility creates respect. And his ability to listen shows strength, not weakness. The same principle applies to women. Partnership requires respect in both directions. A woman shouldn't use her strength as a weapon to humiliate a man, just as a man shouldn't use ideas about leadership as a weapon to control a woman. The goal shouldn't be to decide who wins the relationship. The goal should be to build a relationship where both people feel safe, respected, and valued. We live in a time when people often reach into tradition and pull out only the parts that benefit them. A man may say that he believes in traditional gender roles when he wants to be obeyed, but completely forgot those same traditions when financial responsibility or protection becomes difficult. A woman may be expected to work like a modern partner, contribute financially like a modern partner, manage the home like a traditional partner, raise children like a full-time parent, and still accept a lower position whenever authority is being discussed. That's not tradition. That's an impossible job description. Nobody can continuously perform every role without eventually becoming exhausted. You can't expect one person to be the provider, the nurturer, the household manager, the emotional counselor, the parent, the partner, and the person responsible for maintaining intimacy while the other person reserves the right to claim authority whenever convenient. If people want traditional roles, then they need to have an honest conversation about what those roles actually require from both people. If they want an equal partnership, then that also requires honesty. But mixing the systems together only when one person benefits creates confusion and resentment. The real issue isn't whether every relationship must follow one specific model. Different adults can build different kinds of relationships. What matters is that the expectations are clear, fair, and mutual. Nobody should discover halfway through the relationship that they're expected to carry responsibilities they never agreed to while surrendering control over areas that directly affect their lives. Men who truly care about the women in their lives have to pay attention to the invisible labor that often goes unnoticed. Look around. Who remembers the important dates? Who notices when the children are struggling? Who knows what food is running low? Who remembers appointments? Who maintains communication between family members? Who anticipates problems before they become emergencies? Those responsibilities may not always come with a paycheck, but they cost energy. A woman can look like she's doing fine while carrying a mental load that never turns off. She may be sitting beside you physically while her mind is calculating bills, schedules, family problems, and tomorrow's responsibilities. Then people wonder why she's stressed, distant, or tired. Sometimes the most loving thing a man can do isn't to give another speech about how a woman should behave. Sometimes it's to look around and ask, "What can I take off your shoulders, baby?" That's leadership too. In fact, that's often closer to real leadership than demanding recognition. A man doesn't lose his masculinity by washing dishes, changing a diaper, making an appointment, listening to his partner's problems, or taking responsibility for his share of the household. If anything, refusing to do these things while demanding authority raises a more serious question about what kind of leadership is actually being offered. Real strength isn't proven by how many people you can command. It's revealed by how much responsibility you're willing to carry without expecting someone else to collapse under the weight of your expectations. At the same time, honest conversations have to go in both directions. Some women have been forced to become so self-reliant that they struggle to recognize healthy support when it finally appears. A person who has survived disappointment after disappointment can develop protective habits that remain even when the environment changes. That's understandable, but healing requires awareness. If a responsible and dependable man is consistently showing up, the relationship still requires room for him to participate. You can't complain that you're carrying everything while refusing to let anyone share the weight. The challenge is learning the difference between protecting yourself from unreliable behavior and automatically assuming that everyone will eventually disappoint you. Communication matters here. Instead of silently carrying resentment for years, both people have to discuss expectations early. Who handles what? How are financial responsibilities divided? Who makes major decisions? How are children raised? What does leadership mean to each person? What does respect mean? What are the boundaries around intimacy? These conversations may not feel romantic, but they're very much necessary. A lot of relationships don't collapse because people stop loving each other. They collapse because people entered the relationship with completely different expectations and never discussed them until resentment had already taken over. A healthy relationship should not make one person feel like an employee who has to perform duties while another person enjoys the privilege of being in charge. That's not partnership. That's hierarchy without accountability. A strong relationship allows both people to bring their strengths to the table. One person may be better with finances. The other may be better at emotional communication. One may be calm during a crisis. The other may be better at planning. The goal isn't to force people into roles that don't fit them simply because of gender. The goal is to create a system where the family benefits from the strengths of both people. There will be moments when one person has to carry more, no doubt. Life isn't always balanced. Someone may lose a job. Someone may become overwhelmed. Someone may go through a difficult period. Partnership means understanding that the weight may shift back and forth over time. But temporary imbalance is different from permanent exploitation. If one person is always drowning while the other person is always giving instructions from the shore, something is definitely wrong. We can't talk about respect as if it only matters when someone wants obedience. Respect has to exist during disagreements, during financial struggles, during parenting, during emotional conversations, and during intimate moments. A woman shouldn't have to earn basic respect by becoming everything to everyone. A man shouldn't have to demand respect through fear or control. Respect grows when people consistently treat each other like human beings whose needs, feelings, boundaries, and contributions matter. That's especially important when discussing intimacy. No adult relationship should be built around one person's desires being automatically more important than the other's. Connection requires communication. Trust requires safety. Desire can't be separated from the emotional reality of the relationship. If a woman feels like she's only valued for what she provides, then eventually she may begin to question whether she's loved for who she is. And if a man feels constantly rejected or disrespected, he may also begin withdrawing. That's why neither person's emotional experience should be dismissed. The answer isn't to decide that men are always wrong or women are always right. The answer is to stop avoiding the difficult questions. Maybe we've spent too much time arguing over who should be in charge and not enough time asking whether both people feel supported. A relationship shouldn't be a battlefield where each person is fighting to avoid being controlled by the other. It should be a place where both people can become stronger because they know they're not carrying life alone. For the men who are listening, understand this. If the woman in your life is carrying the family, managing the household, solving the problems, contributing financially, holding the emotional world together, and constantly making sure everyone else is okay, don't be surprised if she eventually asks what exactly you're leading. That's not necessarily disrespect. Sometimes that's exhaustion finally finding its voice. And for the women who are listening, your strength doesn't mean that you were created to carry everything forever. You don't have to prove your worth by breaking yourself. Being capable doesn't mean you should always be the one called upon to rescue everyone else. There's nothing wrong with wanting partnership instead of permanent survival. For both men and women, we have to stop bringing the pain of the outside world home and using each other as targets. The Black community has enough pressure coming from outside without Black men and Black men treating each other like the enemy. Everybody may not agree on gender roles, leadership, or the exact structure of a relationship, but we should be able to agree that responsibility, respect, honesty, and mutual care should never be one-sided. And that's the question we all have to ask ourselves. Are we building relationships where both people can breathe, grow, rest, and feel valued? Or are we creating relationships where one person carries the burden while the other claims the authority? Because if the responsibility is shared only when it's convenient and the power is claimed only when it's desired, that's not leadership. That's a double standard. And no relationship can survive forever when one person is expected to carry the whole house while being told they don't have the right to question who is standing at the front door calling themselves the leader. I hope you've appreciated these words. My voice at this point is a bit hoarse. This topic excited me. On to the next one. Much love to you all. Lance Scurv out. I'm going to rest this voice, but while I do, I wish you all nothing more than peace. Take care.